Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield at this time 5 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrabacher.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this resolution, but as this debate progresses, we should be proud of the sincere expressions of concern by our colleagues on both sides of the aisle and both sides of this resolution for the lives and well-being of America's defenders who are now at risk in order to protect our country, our communities, and our families. All of us have been to heartbreaking wakes and funerals and burials. All of us have gone to the bases to see off our reservists and our National Guardsmen and to wish them Godspeed. And all of us have been on the tarmac to greet them when they return, sometimes having lost comrades killed or wounded. All of us want to do what is right for our defenders and for the future of our country. So we need to be extraordinarily careful that whatever we do today honors their efforts and their sacrifice. We should not be the authors of a policy that ensures the lives of these American heroes have been lost in vain. And if at the end of this episode our country is at greater risk, then indeed their lives will have been lost in vain. I am supporting this last effort, this last chance, if you will, to see that our commitment to Iraq will not result in failure. A failure now will have consequences that are worse than the price that we are now paying in blood and treasure. We do not have the option of walking away without consequences. No amount of Midwest corn pressed into ethanol will allow us to ignore the Middle East. And helping establish moderate democratic governments in the Middle East is not just a favor to the people there, but it is an imperative to our own prosperity and security. Our dependency-based friendships with oil-rich yet dictatorial regimes has set the parameters for the fundamental decisions American leaders have made. It has skewed our ability to be a force for freedom and progress. And it is freedom and progress that shield us from the whims of feudalistic, corrupt despots and religious megalomaniacs. It is the onslaught of freedom that will change that reality that we are now dependent upon. That is what we had to deal with, and now we have come to this moment of decision. I wish it were not so, but it is a sad reality that what is right is usually not easy. The right course is, in the long term, usually frustrating and heart-wrenching. There are stalls and reverses to every historically significant event and undertaking. And there are always those who will walk away when the road gets rough, who cannot see the end, and when uncertainty looms. If one seeks certainty, bold actions will never happen. And only if we are bold to our enemies and steadfast will we ever succeed in any international endeavor. The current conflict in Iraq has several dimensions, and yes, it is between the Sunnis and the radical Shiite sects of Islam, a bloody Janus with one face to Tehran and the other to Riyadh. But don't be fooled, Mr. Speaker. The murderers, torturers, and haters on both sides revile the United States, and the sword of Sadr and the bombs of Al-Qaeda have turned on each other, but they both have a dream that is close to their hearts, and that dream is a nightmare to those who cherish freedom and to those who stand with liberty and seek comity among the people of the world. That macabre nightmare is the removal of the United States' influence from the Muslim world. You see, there is another force in Iraq and throughout that part of the world where the majority of people are guided by the visions of the Prophet Muhammad. Those of whom I speak are those Muslims who desire liberty and justice, who want government to be elected and directed by the people, who do not want to live their life in fear and would choose a positive relationship with the Western world. They are there, as we've witnessed in one of the most devout Muslim countries of the world, Afghanistan. It was not the American soldiers, but the Afghan people themselves who drove out the Taliban and Al-Qaeda from their country. Similarly, moderate Muslims, people of goodwill all over the Middle East, and they are there and they tremble that America will lose its resolve and retreat before a radical, fanatical form of Islam. An American retreat condemns them to suppression under the heels of fanatic Muslims who hate our way of life and are willing to murder anyone who suggests that Islam and the West can live at peace with one another and that we can respect each other's faith and build a better, more peaceful, and yes, a freer world. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for additional 2 minutes.
Give the gentleman an additional 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Gentleman
Mr. Speaker,
recognized for 2 minutes.
if the sole superpower cannot stabilize Iraq, we are not a superpower. If we cannot thwart such a gang of bandits and savages as we face in Iraq, who will stand with us anywhere? Who will be our ally? We must not lose in Iraq. But what does that mean? That means we must not leave that country defeated and in retreat, or we and our families will lose and in the short run pay a horrible price. Yes, if we retreat from Iraq, these ghouls who kill civilians, who would kill civilians, and are currently killing civilians by the tens of thousands, they will follow us home and they will be emboldened. The sides are chosen, the game is in play. We will determine, not the terrorists or the radical lunatics, who stands and who falls, who marches forward and who retreats. All of this will be determined by our military capabilities, our technological advantages, but even more so by our will, by our desire, and by our sheer grit. What we do today makes the future. We choose how it will be shaped. I am reminded of General Pétain, the French commander who fought the Germans at the Battle of Verdun, and some attribute the phrase, "they shall not pass," to him. Well, he rallied the French people to that German onslaught, but after 20 years later, he capitulated to Nazi Germany almost without a fight, because he and the people of France viewed the Second World War as not worthy of the price that was necessary to prevent a Nazi victory. Well, what that defeatism and appeasement, what did it do? The cost was unimaginable. Let us today not make this severe misjudgment again about the magnitude of the downside of retreating before an evil force that threatens the West. There will be a cost with the retreat. So let us note that what we do and what we do in Iraq will determine if the West will truly stand behind any ally of freedom and any enemy of radical Islam. Let us make sure there is hope in the Middle East and throughout the world.
Gentlemen.